Live from the church basement, it's the Northwoods Assembly Bible Study with PB&G, where if you miss a little, you miss a lot. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
You're welcome.
All right. If you have your Bibles, we are going to be again in the book of 2 Samuel tonight. I believe somewhere around chapter 13, correct? All right.
I believe so.
All right. Make sure you have your theater candy and your coffee ready. And again, as always, this area here on the side, the live chat feature is for you to ask questions as we go along in the Bible study, to interact with Gary and I, to interact with each other in that live stream. And if you have any questions, it's the hard ones, I get the easy ones. So we're going to open with prayer, and then we're going to get started. All right?
All right.
Go.
God, tonight, thank you for this place, for your word, for this chance to get into it and discuss who we are and how all those things interconnect, God, so that we can become who you want us to be. Just help us to listen, to hear, just to seek you tonight, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right. All right. Got a few people tuned in. 2 Samuel.
Right before 3 Samuel.
13. I'm taking this pen right here. That's a beauty. All right.
But it doesn't have anything on it, see?
You got to push the button, Gary.
Oh.
All right.
It's like magic.
All right. Did we leave off at verse 1?
I think we finished off chapter 12, and yeah, we're going to start right off of chapter 13. Lucky chapter 13. Yeah.
All right. Want me to read verses 1 and 2, and you can take it from there?
Sure.
All right. 2 Samuel, chapter 13, starting at verse 1. What up, Gail? What?
He's getting some milk duds.
Oh, I has Boston baked beans.
And
anyway, here we go.
I need a little stand for my phone. I have to print my notes. There we go.
Oh.
There we go.
Well, actually, kind of where did we leave off? What's going on?
Yeah, the old incident with David and Bathsheba and questionable judgment. And,
and the baby died.
The baby died, and then Nathan came in
and said, "Here's this story about a lamb and the gift."
Yeah, named Dead. What's interesting in that, and I don't know if we touched on it last week, is David says, "Well, who is this man? He should repay this fourfold."
Yeah.
And before it's all said and done, David is going to lose 4 sons. So his prediction, what he said should happen to that man, is kind of going to happen. And the first one was the baby.
Yes. Yes. Now we move into chapter 13.
And then Nathan came in, and after he said, "David, you are that man," then he kind of, the floodgates burst, and he said, this is what's going to happen, David. You had your fun. Here's the price. Yeah,
it was just such a crazy thing when we talked about it, that whole Bathsheba incident. He becomes Saul. And then it's like he snaps out of it. But by then, the sin is done, and there's always a price for sin.
Right. And not to say that we're helpless against sin. Sin will overpower you or anything, but you can almost feel it in David. He's a different person in there. He's being driven by this sin, by this desire. He's given its way to it, and it's kind of become his master for a little bit.
Yeah, we talked about how in his past you could see that this was his particular sin choice. This was his weakness.
It was, yeah.
If he was going to be exploited, this is where the devil was going to exploit him. And he does. So here we go. Verse 1 of chapter 13. In the course of time, Amnon, son of David, fell in love with Tamar, the beautiful of Absalom, son of David. Amnon became frustrated to the point of illness on account of his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin, and it seemed impossible for him to do anything to her. This is a weird 2 sentences,
You think?
right?
Yeah.
Let's go over
That's
the
his brother for
character,
their mother.
their characters and their relationships to each other.
Yeah. They're half brothers and sister. Brother from another mother. David, of course, and then one of his.
So David is the dad of all of them.
Yes.
And one of David's sons is now in love with one of
Yes.
of others.
Did you?
Yes.
Because she's very beautiful apparently, and I don't know if it was me after having read some of the Old Testament, I wouldn't name my daughter Tamar, but to this point where he is physically making himself ill. He can't think about anything else. He's consumed with his desire for his sister.
Yeah, isn't that is just dark and bizarre. It is perverse. It is twisted. It is just.
Even though this is the Old Testament and things were a little different, they're not that different.
Well, and again, the Bible is showing things because they happened,
Right.
because these were true events, because this was history.
Yeah.
It's not hiding anything. It's not trying to reconstruct something. It's not telling a tale to make someone look good. This is the whole unvarnished truth of the mess that these people were.
Yeah, this is what happened.
And we see that.
So and Absalom is he'll figure prominently later, but he's the older brother of Tamar.
Basically, who is fallen in love with his sister, and there's this burning desire for incest.
Yeah, and
in the first 2 sentences,
it's a little bit subtle there, right at that last sentence. She was a virgin, so he was unable to do anything to her. It's like, well, if he had had his way with her, people would have known. So he was frustrated, so because he couldn't.
Right.
Because she was a virgin. Darn it, what's wrong with her? So
if she wasn't a virgin, if she was, if she'd been out there playing the field a little bit, it would have been easier for him,
right,
to be with her.
Yeah.
But because of that, and that frustrates him all the more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He needs to go on Dr. Phil or Maury or something. I don't know, one of those guys. Yeah. Okay. Take verse 3 and go from there.
3. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shemiah, David's brother. And Jonadab was a very shrewd man. So this Jonadab guy is their cousin.
Yep.
He said to him, verse 4, O son of the king, why are you so depressed morning after morning? Will you not tell me? Then Amnon said to him, I'm in love with Tamar, the sister of my brother Absalom. And Jonadab said to him, lie down in your bed and pretend to be ill. And when your father comes to you.
I was just going to say, this is he's getting advice from King David's brother's son.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're keeping it all in the family.
Yeah.
I mean, even where he goes for advice. And this guy gives him, this guy is as bad as he is. Keep going. You'll see why.
Yeah. Amnon is, at this point, he was the first, he's the crown prince.
Yeah.
So verse 5, Jonadab said to him, lie down in your bed and pretend to be ill. And when your father comes to see you, Tamar, come to me and give me some food to eat, and let her prepare the food in my sight so that I might see it and eat from her hand. So Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. See him, and my sister Tamar come and make that
wow, are literally conspiring on how to get this chick into his bedroom.
Mhm.
Easy, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, hopefully we haven't lost connection completely.
hopefully, we'll see. I don't know.
We'll keep going.
Yep.
Okay.
We'll just pretend it's working.
Yeah.
Hopefully we haven't lost
Oh,
All right.
connection.
See, it's working.
Yeah. Okay.
There you go.
All right. Okay. So, verse
Yeah,
7.
7, yeah. Then David said to the house, sent to the house for Tamar, saying, "Go now to your brother Amnon's house and prepare food for him." So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house, and he was lying down. And she took dough, kneaded it, and made cakes in his sight, and baked the cakes. Oh, I think I got 2 pages, because that next word doesn't make sense with that sentence. She took the pan and dished them out before him, but he refused to eat. And Amnon said, "Have everyone go out from me." So everyone went out from him. And then Amnon said to Tamar, "Bring the food into the bedroom, that I may eat from your hand." So Tamar took the cakes which she had made and brought them into the bedroom to her brother Amnon. I wonder if this is anybody but her brother. That's like,
Who,
you know?
Oh, the-
"Lie with me, sister." But she answered him, "No, my brother, do not violate me, for such a thing is not done in Israel. Do not do this disgraceful thing. As for me, where can I get rid of my reproach? And as for you, you will be like one of the fools in Israel. Now therefore please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you." However, he would not listen to her, since he was stronger than she. He violated her. This,
she's even giving him an out.
yeah, I mean, first, I mean, this would have been, I mean, this is still a sister. So, I mean, to marry her would have been, but she's saying just, that's better than this.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk to the king, and maybe he can okay this inbred marriage thing. It would be what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's wisdom in what she says too. She'll be as one of these fools. Incidentally, that is Nabal. Incidentally, Nabal, if you do this. And then she says, "Well, how can I get rid of my reproach?" The law was that if a man did this to him, and then he had to marry her. But she's saying, "If you do this to me, we can't get married. So how am I going to get rid of my reproach? What am I going to do? And you're the crown prince. If you do this, you're throwing away your chance of being a king." I mean,
Yeah. Verse 14 in my Bible says, "But he refused to listen to her, and since he was stronger than she was, he raped her."
mhm.
And so there's the event happens, and then the very next verse is psychologically telling.
It's hard to remember back in Genesis, Jacob's daughter was raped by Shechem. The language is like intentionally mimics the language then the way this is written, but there's a parallel here that I don't know. I'll just throw it out there, and you can decide the merit of it. Amnon pretends to be ill. He sends for this woman to be brought to his house so that he can do whatever he wants, and he forces her to have intercourse. There's a ring there of David.
Mhm. Yeah. It's this plotting and scheming to get in.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't say that David raped Bathsheba, but I mean, realistically, if the king comes and gets you and brings you into his bedroom and say, "Hey, we're going to do this," what are you going to say to the king?
And she's a happily married woman,
Yeah,
from all accounts up to that point. So yes.
I mean, his will has a force of its own as the king. So I mean, yeah.
And so verse 15, the very next verse, It says, then Amnon hated her with intense hatred. In fact, he hated her more than he had loved her. Amnon said to her, get up and get out.
Yep.
What did yours say?
He hated her with a very great hatred. For the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her, which wasn't really love.
He didn't love her. He lusted her. His flesh was satisfied. He cast her out.
Mhm.
Just cast her. You're nothing.
Yeah. Well, he probably realizes now that that fleeting moment of pleasing the flesh is over. He realizes what that's going to cost him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, now he's upset. He's angry because what he's just done has cost him everything, but it was his doing,
And so how does she respond to that in verse 16?
Wisely. Again, she said, no, because this wrong is greater than the other that you have done to me.
How does that, what does she mean?
Now she's as a virgin, she would have been, David would have found a husband for her, of high station, probably another prince or something like that. She would have been married off. It would have been a big deal. She would have been taken care of. But now that she's not a virgin, there's not anybody who's going to be willing to marry her in that regard. So
she's damaged goods.
Yeah, she's going to end up living in David or her older brother's house and just kind of helping take care of somebody else's kids.
And it's not her fault. It was the culture in the world they lived in.
It was, yeah.
And she understood that you slept with me. Now we're going to have to be together. That's just how it's going to have to be.
Yeah.
And he's like, get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And again, she's kept her head through all of this. Stunning, right?
Yeah. I mean, she's still making sense even after what he's done. Yeah. Yet he would not listen to her, it says again. In verse 17, then he called his young men who attended him and said, now throw this woman out of my presence and lock the door behind her. Now she had on a long-sleeved garment, for in this manner the virgin daughters of the king dressed themselves in robes. Then this attendant took her out and locked the door behind her. And Tamar put ashes on her head and tore her long-sleeved garment which was on her. And she put her hand on her head and went away crying loud as she wept. How's that garment described in your translation?
Verse 17, he called his personal servant and said, get this woman out of here and bolt the door after her. So the servant put her out and bolted the door after her. She was wearing a richly ornamented robe, for this was the kind of garment the virgin daughters of the king wore. Tamar put ashes on her head, tore the ornamented robe she was wearing, put her hands on her head, and went away weeping aloud as she went. So it was a very distinctive garment that was worn by the king's daughters who were virgins.
There's the same description of another garment earlier in the Old Testament, and it's translated there as a many-colored coat. That would be Joseph's
yeah.
Technicolor dream coat. This is the same, is described exactly as the same. So, yeah, that's torn. I mean, that's symbolic of Amnon has taken something from her intensely personal, something that never can be returned. Something that was
Joseph's coat. Joseph's coat set him apart as a favorite.
Yeah,
as a prized child, and that was Tamar. And again, that was stripped from her.
Yeah,
and then she's cast aside like nothing.
Yeah. So not only, her person is violated, her virginity is taken, something that was never meant to be taken, only given.
And her status can never be restored.
And now her future is taken as well. I mean,
it can never be restored. Yeah.
And just on his whim, because I want that. Okay, now I don't want that.
So verse 20.
So since the ashes, she tore her garment, and it's just like you would do in mourning. I mean, because now she's devastated, 20. Then Absalom, her brother, said to her, has Amnon, your brother, been with you? But no, keep silent, my sister.
What does he do? And mother, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a tricky situation, obviously, with no good resolution for David. I mean, you put the crown prince to death. I mean, what do you do? But to do nothing is the worst thing he could do. You can't just ignore it.
Well, yeah, because now Amnon has gotten away with it.
Mhm.
He's absolutely gotten away with it.
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
no consequence.
Yep. And Absalom, you see the difference here between Amnon and Absalom. Amnon is, I have this burning desire. I'm going to figure out a way to meet it and to fulfill it. Absalom, in his burning hatred, doesn't say a word.
No.
He's a schemer. He's a plotter. He's gonna get revenge, but he's gonna do it his way. So he doesn't say a word. He doesn't acknowledge Amnon. He doesn't nothing. Now in verse 23 it says, now it came about after 2 full years that Absalom had sheep shears in Baal Hazor, which is near Ephraim, and Absalom invited all the king's sons. Absalom came to.
So he's playing the long game.
Yeah.
This has been simmering on low heat on the back burner for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Waiting for the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the difference between those two brothers. One is, commits his crime in the heat of passion. Absalom is cold and calculating, and he's not making a mistake that he didn't think out. Verse 24, Absalom came to the king and said, behold, now your servant has sheep shearers. Please let the king and his servants go up with your servant. But the king said to Absalom, no, my son, we should not all go, for we will be burdensome to you. Although he urged him, he would not go, but blessed him. Then Absalom said, if not, please let my brother Amnon go with us. And the king said to him, well, why should he go with you? But when Absalom urged him, he let Amnon and all the king's sons go with him.
Really bright.
Well,
What's happening here?
Absalom's clever here. If David, what he wants to do is get Amnon alone out there. But if David had said yes, the whole ruse would have been shot down. Which I guess he would have probably waited for another chance.
Right. He would have planned another day.
But he manipulates David here by offering something he didn't think David was going to take so that he could get what he wanted afterward. And he pulls it off.
Well, and after 2 years, they all think this is water under the bridge. This issue is past.
Yeah.
That it's not a thing anymore.
Yeah.
He doesn't even consider.
I mean, David remember Nabal, the
Test. Test. How about now? How about now?
It's moving.
Okay. We should have it there.
It's moving the needle.
Yeah, we should have sound there.
There you are.
Okay.
Woo!
All right. Okay.
You poor folks, you can hear me again.
All right. So here we are. Turn what?
I said,
Oh.
oh. Turn down now. Now I can't get rid of the sound.
Verse 34.
You gotta find it. 32, 33.
34.
There
Meanwhile,
it is.
Absalom fled.
Now Absalom had fled. And the young man who was the watchman raised his eyes and looked, and behold, many people were coming from the road behind him by the side of the mountain. And Jonadab said to the king, behold, the king's sons have come, according to your servant's word. So it happened. As soon as he had finished speaking, behold, the king's sons came and lifted their voices and wept. And also the king and all his servants wept very bitterly. So Absalom, his words come through, and the way it's described, you could tell they went off to the east and sheared the sheep to their little party and stuff. But when they come back from the west. So they didn't just go there and come back.
No.
They went.
Yep.
Yeah. And then they all regathered later and then came back. 37. Now Absalom fled and went to Talmai, the son of Ammihud, the king of Geshur. And David mourned for his son every day. So Absalom had fled and gone to Geshur, and was there 3 years. The heart of King David longed to go out to Absalom, for he was comforted concerning Amnon since he was dead. So that Geshur is his grandfather, Absalom's grandfather. So that's why he went where he went.
Well, and this is extremely tragic because his daughter is broken.
Mm-hmm.
She's been destroyed. His one son is dead, so he's lost him, and he's lost Absalom too now.
Mm-hmm.
His family is coming apart fast.
Yep.
And in a major way. So
you remember what? There's still echoes of David in the kids. You remember Nathan said, "This is what's going to happen to your household." After what you've done with Bathsheba, then Amnon goes out and does something with a lot of similarities to what David did with Bathsheba.
Yep.
Then Absalom goes out and does things that's not without some similarities to what David did to Uriah.
Yeah. Yep.
These things are playing out in his kids, and it reminds me of Eli, who was the man, the priest, but couldn't control his sons.
His sons.
And David's in the same boat. His sons are running rampant, doing whatever. David's the man, but his kids not so much.
Chapter 14. Joab, son of Zeruiah, knew that the king's heart longed for Absalom. So Joab sent someone to Tekoa and had a wise woman brought from there. And he said to her, "Pretend you are in mourning, dress in mourning clothes, don't use any cosmetic lotions, act like a woman who has spent many days grieving for the dead, then go to the king and speak these words to him." And Joab put the words into her mouth. So what's happening?
Joab's going to construct a ruse of his own to try to get to reconcile David and Absalom.
Yeah.
David did what he did with Amnon, not much of anything.
Right.
So Joab sees this situation's not good. So what can I do to spur David here and make something happen?
He doesn't seem to have a lot of interaction with his sons, at least in the way that a real dad should.
No.
No.
Yeah, I think some of that's a function of how many wives and how many kids, and and you're a king besides, and this isn't good.
So he hires this woman to pretend she's a woman in grieving, to go before him, pretend that she's very sorrowful, and give him a message.
Mm-hmm.
And what is that?
That message is, now when the woman of Tekoa, verse 4, spoke to the king, she fell on her face to the ground and prostrated herself and said, help, O king. The king said to her, what's your trouble? And she answered, truly I'm a widow, for my husband is dead. Your maidservant had 2 sons, but the 2 of them struggled together in the field, and there was no one to separate them. So one struck the other and killed him. Now behold, the whole family is risen against your maidservant, and they say, hand over the one who struck his brother, that we may put him to death for the life of his brother whom he killed, and destroy the heir also. Thus they will extinguish my coal which is left, so as to leave my husband neither name nor remnant on the face of the earth.
So what's that about?
Well, underneath that story, you can see some subtle changes to it, but it's the story of Cain and Abel.
Yeah.
And obviously David is going to know how God ruled in that situation.
Yeah.
It was, no, don't put him to death. Not only don't put him to death, but I'll put a curse on anybody that does.
Yeah.
And that's the ruling that's expected for David to give, which he does. She comes and she tells him that story, so help me, king, because my one son killed the other, and now they want to kill him, and I won't have any sons left. I already don't have a husband, and I'm going to be all by myself. Which means in Israel, then she would be disinherited, and she couldn't own the property. It would go back to somebody else in the family.
Yep.
She'd have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So David is, being the just judge, she figures.
So she's made up this story to try to manipulate David's response to
Yeah.
Absalom
in some
with
ways,
the help of someone else.
in some ways, it feels like Joab was listening when Nathan talked to David, because it has some similarities.
Mm.
It's like, let's tell David this, and then when he makes the right judgment, then we'll tell him, hey, why don't you make that same judgment here
Right.
in your own situation, David? And you get that feeling like if the situations with David and his sons had happened to somebody else, David would have been swift to act. But since it was himself and his own kids and stuff, he's afraid to do it. So,
Verse 8.
verse 8. Then the king said to the woman, go to your house, and I will give orders concerning you. The woman of Tekoa said to the king, oh, my lord, the king, the iniquity is on me and my father's house, but the king and his throne are guiltless. So the king said, whoever speaks to you, bring him to me, and he will not touch you anymore. Then she said, please let the king remember the Lord your God, so that the avenger of blood will not continue to destroy. Otherwise, they will destroy my son. And he said, as the Lord lives, not one hair of your son shall fall to the ground. So he takes an oath by God that, hey, nobody's going to touch your son.
Well,
I'll make sure of it.
and the point of this is, again, in this concocted story, it's Absalom they're talking about.
It is. Yeah.
So he's basically saying no one's going to harm Absalom.
Yep.
And he doesn't even realize it.
Right.
He's being manipulated.
He is.
Mhm.
And the logic doesn't track. Hey, my sons had got in an argument and one killed the other. That's a heat of the moment thing.
Mhm.
Absalom spent 2 years plotting the murder of his
Yep.
brother.
Yep.
It's not exactly the same thing,
No.
but I guess we'll see how it comes out anyway. Then verse 12. Then the woman said, please let your maidservant speak a word to my lord the king. And he said, speak. And the woman said, why then have you planned such a thing against the people of God? For in speaking this word, the king is as one who is guilty, in that the king does not bring back his banished one. For we will surely die and are like water spilled on the ground, which cannot be gathered up again. Yet God does not take away life, but plans ways so that the banished one will not be cast out from him. I just want to pause there for a minute. One, the wise woman of Tekoa apparently lives up to her billing here. But two, this is Old Testament as Old Testament gets here. We're in Samuel. This description of God, I just want you to read it, because this is what the wise woman says describing God in the Old Testament. In this, the God of the Old Testament that everybody envisions is not this. Yet God does not take away life, but plans ways so that the banished one will not be cast out from him. That's God's heart. It always has been.
Well, and she looks at him and she says, okay, king, you've made this decision on this matter. Why can't you apply this to your life and your situation?
Mm-hmm.
she's, I mean, it's finally what she's doing is being exposed. It's coming around. And she says, this isn't about banishing people. This is about restoring people. That's God's heart. So David, in the situation with your sons, that's what you should do.
Mm-hmm.
You've just said that in someone else's life, in another situation, that's what should happen. Now, David, you need to do that.
Right. And as soon as she does that, it's like an Esther moment. She is stepping out of protocol. She's stepping out of what she's allowed to do, and she's putting her life in David's hands, because you don't just start telling the king, hey, now let me show you something.
Yeah, let me school you.
You can come to the king and ask for judgment, but you can't don't presume to just give him advice.
Well, and the fact that this was all concocted is exposed. I mean, he knows that, okay.
Yeah.
Now I know why you're here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He sees through it pretty quickly at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
17? 16?
15. Now, the reason I have come to speak this word to my lord the king is that the people have made me afraid, so that your maidservant said, now let me speak to the king. Perhaps the king will perform the request of his maidservant. For the king will hear and deliver his maidservant from the hand of the man who would destroy both me and my son from the inheritance of God. Then your maidservant said, please let the word of my lord the king be comforting. For as an angel of God, so is my lord the king, to discern good and evil. And may the Lord your God be with you. So that's a pretty good comparison on David's part. I mean, there's an angel of God. Then the king answered and said to the woman, please do not hide anything from me that I'm about to ask you. And the woman said, let my lord the king please speak. So the king said, is the hand of Joab with you in all this?
This sure smells like his doing.
He figured that out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And the woman replied, as your soul lives, my lord the king, no one can turn to the right or to the left from anything that my lord the king has spoken. Indeed, it was your servant Joab who commanded me, and it was he who put all these words in the mouth of your maidservant. In order to change the appearance of things, your servant Joab has done this thing. But my lord is wise, like the wisdom of an angel of God, to know all that is in the earth. So, yeah, it was Joab.
Yep. This whole thing was a plot and a plan.
It was.
And I made it all the way in here in front of you, and I said it.
Yep. So
it worked.
Just mull that over.
Yep.
There you go, God, King. Think about that.
Verse 21.
Then the king said to Joab, behold, now I will surely do this thing. Go therefore, bring back the young man Absalom.
So he's like, yep, you're right. The way you went about it, pretty shifty, but in the end, it was sound. I should forgive him. Bring him before me.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Like, all right, bring him back.
Yep.
Joab fell on his face to the ground and prostrated himself and blessed the king. And then Joab said, today your servant knows that I have found favor in your sight, O my lord the king, and that the king has performed the request of his servant. So Joab arose and went to Geshur and brought Absalom to Jerusalem. However, the king said, let him turn to his own house and let him not see my face. So Absalom turned to his own house and did not see the king's face. So it's like you've been given an official pardon, but you're not coming to family dinner.
Yep. It's kind of like, go to your room. I don't want to see you right now.
Yeah. It's so like,
he's back in the palace, but that's just step one. Let's just, yeah, this is hard.
And interestingly, that Cain and Abel story that they kind of built their little parable off of, God didn't sentence, Cain to death, but essentially he gave him a life sentence. He said, he has gone out from my presence. Right. He's no longer allowed to see my face. And,
right.
And in a way, that seems like that's kind of what David's doing. It's like, okay, you come back into Jerusalem, but you're not getting any of this David love.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is interesting was when Amnon died, technically Absalom became the crown prince. And now he's kind of thrown away his chance at being the crown prince by killing his brother. It's just
These guys aren't much for thinking ahead, are they?
no. I don't know. So he's back anyway. He's back in Jerusalem and stuff. So verse 25, now in all Israel, no one was as handsome as Absalom, so highly praised. From the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, there was no defect in him. He was beautiful. Who does that description remind you of?
Gary?
Saul.
Not Gary?
Not
Not
Gary.
Gary.
What?
Not beautiful.
Saul was a stud.
He was.
He was
That's the
clearly-
way he was
Scripture says
described.
that he was a
It's
stud,
like
yeah.
he was everything you want a king to be. He was, whoa, look at that. That's Saul.
And Absalom, he was
Absalom.
one fine looking specimen of a man.
And the fact that Absalom is described like Saul should give us a little hint as to Absalom's future.
Yep.
So from the crown of his head, there was to the bottom of his foot, no defect in him. He was perfect.
And he's got a beautiful head of thick, heavy hair.
Thick.
I mean, Fabio.
Yeah, he's Fabio.
Yeah. Says whenever he cut the hair of his head, he used to cut his hair from time to time when it became too heavy. Too heavy for him. He would weigh it, and its weight was 200 shekels by the royal standard. He had some pretty nice hair.
That's about 4 pounds.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this gorgeous man with, romance novel hair. I mean, yeah, that's Absalom. So verse 27.
It kind of reminds me a little of Samson, who was all hair and no substance.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, at least Samson's hair was because he was supposed to have taken the Nazirite vow. He's just got hair because he's just.
Well, and that vow is interesting because the men in Israel didn't just cut their hair. Their hair was still kind of considered sacred. It was they just didn't do it. So the fact that Absalom cuts his hair just because it kind of feels like it is kind of a selfish act. It's not the norm.
Yeah.
So
27.
To Absalom there were born 3 sons and 1 daughter whose name was Tamar. She was a woman of beautiful appearance. He named him after his sister.
Not for his sister.
Named her after. Now Absalom lived 2 full years in Jerusalem and did not see the king's face. Then Absalom sent for Joab to send him to the king, but he would not come to him. So he sent again a second time, but he would not come. Therefore he said to his servants, see, Joab's field is next to mine, and he has barley there. Go set it on fire. So Absalom's servants set the field on fire.
So Absalom has been there a couple of years. He's kind of to a point where he's like, I'm sick of this whole thing with my dad. I want to see him. We got to talk. We got to figure this thing out. Joab seems to be the man who's plotted and schemed, and I've talked to him. He's helped me do stuff. He's done other. I mean, he's the man when you want something done, palace intrigue. Joab's the dude, right? So he tries to get a hold of Joab. And Joab says, I'm not dealing with you. I'm not talking to you. So Absalom gets mad and burns down Joab's field.
Pretty clearly, Absalom's not going to be bound by rules or what's expected. If he decides he wants something, he's going to find a way to make it happen.
It's a little mafioso going on here. You disrespect me. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So keep going. Verse 31.
31. Then Joab arose, came to Absalom at his house, and said to him, why have your servants set my field on fire?
Got your attention, didn't I, Joab? You're here now, aren't you?
That's exactly what he says. Absalom answered Joab, behold, I sent for you, saying, come here, that I may send you to the king to say, why have I come from Geshur? It would be better for me still to be there. No, therefore, let me see the king's face, and if there's iniquity in me, let him put me to death. So when Joab came to the king and told him, he called for Absalom. Thus he came to the king and prostrated himself on his face to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom. So he kind of calls his bluff. He said, if I'm worthy of death, kill me. If I'm not, then treat me like everybody else.
Yeah. Then I'm your son. Let's get on with it.
which the fact that you didn't get the death sentence you deserved doesn't mean that you're just off the hook and you can pretend like it never happened. That's not exactly how it works.
Things can't go back to normal.
No.
There's too much abnormal in this story.
Right. It's just like Joab's field. You might have gotten to talk to him and maybe you paid him back with some money, but the field still burned.
Yep. The damage has been done.
Yeah.
Tamar has been raped. Your brother, your half brother, is dead. You are an outcast. Joab is exposed as a manipulator, and you've destroyed his property. And I'm supposed to look at you and go, "Oh, it's just like nothing ever happened."
Mm-hmm.
No.
I mean, there's still consequences. I mean, David is learning right now what consequences are. He thought he did what he did and everything was fine and dandy. Now he's learning, hey,
Yeah.
there's still a bill to be paid. Absalom's going to have to learn that sooner or later himself. Right now, he just schemes and gets what he wants and keeps moving.
Well, should we pause at 15?
We could do that instead of starting a new chapter.
Yeah.
We can do that.
All right. Well, we'll do that. We'll wrap it up at 15. Saturday, the meal is tacos.
Yep.
Tacos.
Taco bar.
Taco bar. Okay. So Saturday, 6 o'clock in the sanctuary upstairs. We'll be starting a new series. So that'll be a surprise.
Come on Saturday and for the big reveal.
Yes.
Figure out what it is.
Yeah. I think I know what it is.
Something biblical and stuff.
It's going to be something from the Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Book of maps.
Yeah. It'll apply to kind of, our lives, which is nice, right?
Kind of funny how that seems to happen.
Yeah. We're going to do that. So, all right, Gary will close us with prayer and we'll wrap it up.
All right. God bless you, people, as we get ready to go home from here, and those people are already at home, just to delve back into whatever life has tonight and tomorrow. Lord, just help us to feel your presence, Lord, to feel that you're in control, that your word still applies, that you still have the reins, God, that whatever's going on in this world, it's not a surprise to you. And it may not always be the path we want to walk. It may not always seem easy or pleasant. And sometimes it might seem like that next step is just too much. But God, help us to trust in your guidance, in your hand, and know that just like all these things that happened back then, when you could tell them what was going to happen, God, you still know. So just help us to draw on you, draw on your spirit, draw on your word, and trust you. And just keep walking in that, God, and see what you have for us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right. Thank you very much, all of you who tuned in tonight. And hopefully we'll see you Saturday night up in the sanctuary. We've got a couple of seats left, so come fill them up. That should be it.
Yep.
All right. God bless you all. And 3, 2, 1.
Good night.
Good night.